Also vor allem das Missverständnis ist abzusehen, als ob ich gegen die Technik sei. Ganz im Gegenteil. Ich sehe in der Technik, in ihrem Wesen nämlich, dass der Mensch unter einer Macht steht, die ihn herausfordert und der gegenüber er nicht mehr frei ist.
I wanted to talk today about Martin Heidegger's essay, The Question Concerning Technology. But first, I kind of want to talk about what this channel is, why I'm making these videos, and yeah, so basically I have become very interested in the last year with reading all about how humans are conditioned, how our surroundings make us who we are, how they affect the way that we move throughout the world, how they affect our personal relationships, how they affect the ways that we even just see and experience the world in general. And things that come up there is like culture, religion, but I think an interesting one is technology. And I think because also technology is really in the cultural zeitgeist right now, as something that we should be talking about. We should be thinking about the way that these systems are designed, what they're really doing to us as people. And yeah, I kind of just went down this reading path, but I have found it really difficult to kind of like get my ideas out onto paper, and then also it's difficult to talk about these things with people who just definitely aren't interested. So I decided to make video diaries where I just kind of talk about what I'm reading, my thoughts on it, and yeah, that's kind of the direction that I want to go. I think we're just hopping right into his essay. I think a really good place to start is within the first couple paragraphs. He says, quote, "Everywhere we remain unfree and chained to technology, whether we passionately affirm or deny it, but we are delivered over to it in the worst possible way when we regard it as something neutral. For this concept of it, to which today we particularly like to pay homage, makes us utterly blind to the essence of technology." So basically, in that he's saying that we can't escape the fact that we have and are creating technology. But if we regard it as something neutral, that's where the problem starts to happen. And kind of going into what he means by technology is technology, techne, the Greek root word, is what he says is basically a revealing. Technology reveals the world to us in a way that we were not able to experience it as kind of ourselves now. And I find this really interesting because he has a really great example of this where he talks about the forest, and he kind of talks about how the forest is, he wrote this in like 1954, so he talks about like somebody's grandfather, but basically somebody's grandfather walking through the forest would experience the forest very differently than modern man would, because modern man walks through the forest and sees it as lumber that can be cut down, that can then be shipped off to lumber mills, which then can make paper, which then can be sent to newspapers, and then kind of create ideas out there in the public through the newspaper and the news. And that's kind of how we see it today, but somebody's grandfather would have seen it as just like a kind of forest that can be experienced, to be walked through. Of course, that you can grab lumber from it, you can kind of harvest some of the things that are in there, but you don't look at it as like this resource. And he calls this resource, the way that we look at this resource, as a standing reserve. So basically it's a kind of set or a plot of land or a group of ideas or something like that is there and ready at the need for humans to use to other ends. And that's kind of the way that we've begun to see things with modern technology, is as this kind of standing reserve. And he calls this way of seeing the world influenced and revealing the world influenced by technology as enframing. This kind of concept of enframing, or I think in German it's Gestell, is basically the way that technology then kind of like corrals our thoughts and ways that we view the world and ways that the world is revealed to us into a very specific kind of way of seeing the world. And he doesn't necessarily see this as a problem kind of an outset, at least it seems to me, but what he sees as a problem is when everything in the world, or we start to see more and more things as standing reserve. He uses another example as a river. You put a hydroelectric dam in a river, and you're no longer seeing the river as this thing to be enjoyed and to be interacted with and a part of this large ecology that is incredibly diverse and interconnected, but rather we see it as something that can kind of be dominated and conquered with this dam that can then produce us electricity. The river is not seen as a river, it's seen as a production of electricity. It's seen as standing reserve for us to use to our own ends. And as we start to view all of these different things as standing reserve in our lives and in the world, we start to see other human beings as standing reserves. And this is kind of like the idea of like human resources. Human beings are simply nothing more than their labor output. Human beings are not these manifold creatures with desires and passions and contradictions. Rather we are numbers in a spreadsheet that are used to go accomplish some kind of economic gain, or even the gain of some kind of nation. So this in framing is something that happens to us through technology, and he thinks that this is really one of the big problems of modern technology, is that it enframes us. It almost in a way traps us into a way of thinking, and that we're not able to kind of go outside of that way of thinking, because that's the only way that we're able to see it. I think a good example, and I think Willem Flusser brings this example up, is something like a microscope. Is basically before that, there may have been some thoughts or theories that there were some kind of micro organisms out there, but without the microscope we were unable to see that there are microorganisms there. So we operate in our day-to-day life as if microorganisms do not exist. Until we invent the microscope, we are then able to see that, hey, there is this massive thing of life out there. And this is just one sliver. So basically technology reveals that part of the world to us, and in that act of revealing, it then enframes us to see this is exactly the way that microorganisms interact, until we have some kind of new technology or new way of viewing that becomes our default mode of what's going on underneath the microscope and why. So this can kind of I think in a way get us stuck. I think that I think this is incredibly relevant to today, especially with big data and platform capitalism and surveillance capitalism. Basically seeing human beings as nothing more than these different data points. Like you think about like in that forest concept, like human beings, like a population of human beings is a forest, and human beings are no longer people to be interacted with, people to be spend time with, but they're just data points. They are lumber to be used to be made into paper and created into new things. We are made into consumers who are able to be sold to and targeted to, populations to kind of move and control. And I think that that's the way that we've designed technology is obviously kind of this conquering and trying to like pin down the world, and so that we can kind of order it and understand it, and that has kind of moved into our daily lives today. And I think that we're kind of already seeing, obviously we're already seeing this with rising levels of anxiety and people feeling like they're not attached to anything. People feel very alienated. There's a lot of people who feel very lonely. I think of a really good example of technology literally coming in the modern age and changing the world, the way that we operate and talk to each other, is dating apps. Tinder, Hinge, Bumble. They change the way that we interact, especially as young people, with each other in the dating scene, because now things are more based on your profile. They're more based on kind of these data points that you're able to extract out of yourself and post on the internet, rather than really experiencing the other person as this holistic being that's so much more interesting than just those one little data points that can kind of happen there. I'll talk about it in like another video, but I think that we also begin to adopt those things, and we see ourselves like in our individual selves internally as these kind of data points, that we forget that we're these manifold beings, and we kind of like really heavily identify with these different data points that are kind of pulled out of us through this algorithmic way of seeing the world. I think that that's really something that this is this essay is really speaking to. I think that the really interesting part is towards the end of this, he talks about one of the original technes, or something that was considered a techne in ancient Greece, and has kind of lost that term. But he would say that art, in the past was a techne, and it was a technology, it was a way of seeing the world. And the artist also reveals the world to us. And I think that it's really important to kind of keep that in mind, where, you know, there's this kind of scientific empiricism that we have, that everything can be ordered, everything can be points of data, and then we can understand the world in this way. And I think that's starting to really alienate us from the world. And I think that someone like the artist is somebody who right now really does need to be somebody to look to understand how to navigate the world. And I'm no artist myself. I'm practicing oil painting because it's fun. I actually, you know, am involved in the tech space myself. But these are really things that we should be thinking about, that we should be talking about, that we should be discussing. Is, you know, how are these things shaping the way that we interact with each other? Because they obviously are. But, you know, what are the different ways, and how do we kind of map that out? And that's really the core of the project that I really want to work on with this channel is, you know, what are those different systems out there in the world that condition human beings, that, you know, change the way that we perceive the world, the way that we move through the world, the way that we interact with others. Like, that is the core of what I really want to understand. You know, this is kind of just fun for me. It's just on the side. You know, it's somewhere I'm able to have a discussion. So this is really just a conversation for me. So if you're somebody who is like really deep into this space and you're really passionate about it, would love for you just to kind of comment and give any kind of feedback you have. You know, maybe I'm looking at the way that Heidegger is writing incorrectly, maybe I'm thinking about this all wrong, and you have a different perspective on it. I would love to learn from people who are much more intelligent than me. But that's kind of just what this channel is understanding this material for myself, and really exploring it and just kind of having fun with it. So yeah, if you're interested in continuing to watch, you know, stay and follow along, join the conversation. I would love to have a really good dialogue going back and forth with these kind of just diary entries that I'm doing. Yeah, thanks so much, and have a great rest of your day.